The news did not arrive like a gentle rain. It was a flash flood. It was a house fire in the middle of the night. My husband, the man whose hand I had held through sickness and celebration, was leaving. That alone was a chasm opening at my feet. But the ground did not just crack, it disintegrated. He was leaving me for my sister-in-law, his brother's wife, my friend, the woman who had borrowed my sweaters and held my babies. The betrayal was not a single wound. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, each one deeper than the last, severing not just a marriage but the entire root system of my family, my trust, my reality. I remember sitting on the cold tile of the kitchen floor. The world outside kept moving. Cars drove by. The refrigerator hummed its steady, oblivious tune. But inside me, everything had stopped. It was a silence so loud it hurt my ears. The two people I had built my world around, the two pillars I thought were holding up my life, had conspired to knock it all down. They had chosen each other, and in their choosing, they had unchosen me. It was a rejection so profound, so complete, that it felt like an erasure. I looked at my hands, wondering if they were even real anymore. The complexity was a tangled, thorny mess. It was not just my heart that was broken. It was the entire family portrait, shattered into a million pieces. How do you mourn a marriage when the other woman is at every holiday dinner? How do you explain to your children that their aunt and uncle have created this gaping hole in their world? The lines of loyalty and love were so blurred, so twisted, that there was no clear enemy, no simple story of good versus bad. There was only this suffocating, intricate web of pain, and I was caught right in the center of it, struggling to breathe. I learned that a broken heart feels a lot like a broken body. Every part of me ached with a physical intensity that was staggering. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I would just lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every shared glance, searching for the signs I had missed. The betrayal was a poison seeping into every memory, tainting every happy moment we had ever shared. It was a thief, not only stealing my future, but also ransacking my past. The life I thought I had, the love I thought was real, was it all a lie? This question echoed in the hollow spaces inside me. After the initial explosion, an eerie quiet descended. This was the stillness of devastation. It was the quiet of an empty house where his laughter used to be. It was the silence on the other end of the phone when I would instinctively go to call my sister-in-law my friend before remembering. This quiet was not peaceful. It was heavy. It was a thick fog of confusion and grief that settled over my days, making every simple task feel like climbing a mountain. Getting out of bed was a victory. Making toast was a monumental effort. The world had lost its color, and I was just existing in shades of gray. My children became my anchors in this sea of loss. Their needs, their schedules, their simple, beautiful existence forced me to keep moving. I had to make their lunches. I had to drive them to school. I had to be their constant when their world had also been violently shaken. But at night, when they were asleep, the sadness would come for me. It was a patient, relentless visitor. It sat with me on the couch, wrapped its cold arms around me, and whispered all my deepest fears. I was alone. I was unlovable. I was not enough. I let it wash over me because fighting it took more energy than I had. Loss is a strange and shapeless thing. I was mourning the loss of my husband, yes, but it was so much more than that. I was mourning the loss of the future I had so carefully planned. The holidays, the anniversaries, the growing old together, all gone. I was mourning the loss of my family unit, the easy comfort of our shared history, and I was mourning the loss of myself. The woman I was in that marriage, the confident, trusting person I thought myself to be, she had vanished. In her place was this stranger, this ghost, who felt fragile and lost and profoundly, deeply alone. In that period, I did not try to be strong. I did not try to rush through the pain. I honored it. I gave it space. I understood that this immense grief was the price of the immense love I had given. To pretend I wasn't hurting would be to pretend I hadn't loved. So I cried. I sat in the stillness. I let myself feel every jagged edge of the heartbreak. It was a necessary winter, a time for everything to go dormant. I knew somewhere deep down that I couldn't plant new seeds until I had acknowledged the frozen, barren ground I was standing on. There was no single moment of epiphany, no lightning bolt from the heavens. It was smaller than that. It was a slow, quiet turning. One morning, I woke up, and the first thought in my head wasn't about them. It was about the coffee I wanted to drink. It was a tiny thing, a simple desire that belonged only to me. And in that moment, I felt a flicker. It was the first spark of my own self, separate from the identity of wife or scorned woman. I realized that for years, my happiness had been outsourced. I had handed it to someone else to hold, to protect, and he had dropped it. The decision to focus on myself was not born of strength, but of desperation. It was the only logical next step. I had tried living in the wreckage, and it was suffocating. The alternative was to start building something new, something that was mine. The first step was to choose myself, to decide consciously that my well-being, my peace, and my happiness were now my own responsibility. This was both terrifying and liberating. It meant I had no one to blame anymore, but it also meant I had all the power. I could be the architect of my own life. I started to think of my life as a home that had been condemned. I couldn't just patch the holes. I had to tear it down to the studs and rebuild from the foundation up. This meant examining every belief I held about myself, about love, about what I deserved. I had believed that my worth was tied to being chosen by a partner. I had to unlearn that. I had to learn that I was whole and worthy all by myself. I was not a half waiting for another half. I was a complete circle, all on my own. This became my new mantra, the first brick in my new foundation. Choosing me meant setting boundaries. It meant saying no. It meant disappointing people. I had to create a safe space where I could heal, and that meant limiting contact with the sources of my pain. It was messy and difficult, especially with family ties so entangled. But I learned that my own peace was not up for negotiation. I was no longer willing to set myself on fire to keep others warm. This act of choosing myself again and again, in small ways every day, was the beginning of my return. It was the first light cracking through the dark clouds. Rebuilding is not a passive act. It requires tools. I knew I couldn't do it alone, so my first tool was therapy. I found a therapist who became my guide through the wilderness of my own mind. In her office, I could be completely undone. I could rage and weep and speak the unspeakable truths I had been holding inside. She didn't offer easy answers. Instead, she handed me a flashlight and a map and taught me how to navigate my own inner landscape. She helped me see that my pain was a valid response to trauma, not a personal failing. Therapy was not a sign of weakness. It was an act of profound self-love. My next tool was a pen. I started writing. I filled journals with everything I could not say out loud. I wrote letters I would never send. I wrote about my anger, my sadness, my confusion. The page became a safe container for my chaos. It didn't judge. It just listened. Writing allowed me to untangle the knots in my head, to see the patterns in my pain, and to find the story underneath the noise. It was through writing that I began to hear my own voice again, clear and true, after it had been drowned out for so long. It was my way of processing the poison, one word at a time. I also sought out new friendships. I needed people in my life who knew me as just me, not as one half of a broken couple. I joined a book club. I took a pottery class. I reconnected with old friends who had drifted away. I learned to be vulnerable with these new people, to share my story not as a tragedy, but as a part of my journey. And in return, they shared theirs. I discovered that connection is the antidote to shame. Being seen and accepted for exactly who I was, scars and all, was one of the most powerful healing forces I have ever known. Finally, I built a sanctuary in my own home. I rearranged the furniture. I painted the walls a new color. I filled the space with things that brought me joy. Plants, art, candles with scents I loved, music that made me want to dance. I reclaimed the physical space from the ghosts of the past. My home was no longer a crime scene. It became my haven, a place that reflected the woman I was becoming, not the woman I had been. Every small change was a declaration. This space is mine. This life is mine. I am safe here. The body keeps the score. I had read that somewhere, and I felt the truth of it in my bones. The betrayal lived in my tense shoulders, my shallow breathing, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety in my stomach. For months, I had been disconnected from my physical self, treating my body like an inconvenient suitcase I had to drag around. I knew that to heal my mind, I had to heal my body too. They were not separate. The pain was stored in my cells and I had to help my body release it. I started with walking. I didn't set goals for distance or speed. I just put on my shoes and walked out the door. I walked through my neighborhood, through parks, through trails in the woods. I focused on the feeling of my feet hitting the ground, the rhythm of my breath, the sun on my skin. It was a moving meditation. With every step, I felt like I was walking away from the past and towards something new. I was reclaiming my own strength, my own momentum. My body, which had felt so weak and stagnant, began to feel alive again, capable and strong. Then I found yoga. On the mat, I was forced to be present in my body in a way I hadn't been for years. The instructor would say, "Where are you holding tension?" And I would realize my jaw was clenched, my shoulders were up by my ears. Yoga taught me to breathe into the tight places, to create space where there was constriction. It was not about perfecting the poses. It was about listening to my body, honoring its limits, and celebrating its abilities. Some days I would cry during class, releasing emotions I didn't even know were trapped in my hips or my heart. Self-care became less about bubble baths and more about deep, nourishing attention. I started to pay attention to what I ate, not to lose weight, but to feel energized and healthy. I chose foods that felt good in my body. I rediscovered the pleasure of cooking for myself, of creating something nourishing with my own hands. I prioritized sleep, treating it as the sacred, restorative practice it is. I was learning to mother myself, to give my body the same gentle, consistent care I gave to my children. It was a radical act of self-respect. For a long time, my dreams had been co-authored. They were our dreams, the house we would buy, the places we would travel, the life we would build together. When that life crumbled, I was left with a blank canvas, and honestly, it was terrifying. I had no idea what I wanted for myself, by myself. The process of redefining my dreams was slow and, well, pretty tentative. It began not with grand ambitions, but with small questions. What makes me feel alive? What am I curious about? If I could do anything without fear of failure or judgment, what would it be? I gave myself permission to play, to try things just for the sake of trying them. I took that pottery class I had always been curious about. I felt the wet clay spin in my hands and learned that it was okay to create something messy and imperfect. I signed up for a hiking group and discovered a love for the mountains I never knew I had. These were not goals with a purpose. They were experiments in joy. Each new hobby, each new interest, was a brushstroke of color on my blank canvas, slowly creating a picture of a life that was uniquely mine. From this place of play, new goals began to emerge. I realized I wanted to go back to school. I had put my own educational aspirations on hold to support my family, and now there was nothing holding me back. The thought was both thrilling and scary. It felt big and audacious. But the more I thought about it, the more right it felt. It was a goal that was entirely for me. It was about investing in my own mind, my own future. Taking that first step, researching programs, filling out an application, was a powerful statement that I believed in my own potential. Redefining my dreams meant letting go of the old timeline. I had to release the societal pressure that said I should be at a certain place in life by a certain age. My life was not a race, it was a journey, and it had taken an unexpected, painful detour. But that detour had also led me to new landscapes. I was no longer on the well-trodden path I had planned. I was on my own path, a wilder, more interesting trail that I was clearing for myself, one step at a time. The future was no longer a fixed destination. It was an open horizon full of possibility. Joy, I learned, does not always return in a grand, triumphant parade. It tiptoes back into your life in small, quiet moments. It is easy to miss if you are not paying attention. After living in the muted gray of grief for so long, I started to notice the colors again. It was the deep, impossible blue of the sky after a rainstorm. It was the vibrant pink of a peony blooming in my garden. It was the rich, dark brown of my morning coffee. I trained myself to look for these tiny pockets of beauty, to pause and acknowledge them. They were proof that the world was still a beautiful place. I found joy in reclaiming solitude. For a while, being alone was the same as being lonely. It was a painful reminder of what I had lost. But slowly, I began to transform my solitude into a cherished retreat. I started taking myself on dates. I would go to a movie by myself, sitting in the center of the row with a large popcorn that was all for me. I would take a book to a cafe and spend hours reading with no one to rush me. I learned that I could be my own best company. I was not waiting for someone to complete me. I was enjoying the peace of my own presence. My children became a source of pure, unadulterated joy. Before, my love for them was tangled up in the stress of co-parenting and managing a family. Now I could see them with fresh eyes. I marveled at their funny observations, their uninhibited laughter, their endless capacity for love. We started new traditions, just the three of us. Friday night pizza and movie marathons on the living room floor, spontaneous dance parties in the kitchen. Our little unit of three felt solid, strong, and full of love. The joy we created together was simple, and it was ours. I began to practice gratitude not as a chore, but as a way of seeing. At the end of each day, I would write down 3 small things that brought me a moment of happiness: the friendly wave from a neighbor, the perfect song coming on the radio at the exact right time, the feeling of clean sheets on my bed. This simple practice rewired my brain. It trained me to scan my world for goodness instead of for threats or for what was missing. It taught me that even on the hardest days, there is always something to be thankful for. Joy was not a destination, it was a practice. The betrayal had made me feel like an island, isolated and cut off from the mainland of normal family life. Rebuilding meant constructing bridges. It meant reaching out and daring to trust again. This was not about finding a new romantic partner. It was about finding my people, my tribe. I realized that a tribe is not something you are born into. It is something you build. It is the family you choose, based on shared values and mutual respect and unconditional support. It is the people who see you for who you are and love you not, in spite of your scars, but because of them. I found my tribe in the most unexpected places. In the woman next to me in yoga class, who shared her own story of heartbreak over coffee. In the group of fellow hikers who cheered me on as I struggled up a steep incline. In the online community of women who were also navigating the messy aftermath of divorce. These connections were forged not in perfect happy times, but in shared vulnerability. We showed each other our broken pieces, and instead of judgment, we found compassion and understanding. We were mirrors for each other, reflecting back our own strength and resilience. Learning to trust again was a delicate process. It started with trusting myself, my own intuition. I learned to pay attention to how people made me feel. Did I feel energized and seen in their presence, or did I feel drained and small? I allowed myself to be discerning. I no longer felt the need to be liked by everyone. My energy was a precious resource, and I chose to share it with people who were kind, authentic, and supportive. My circle of friends became smaller, but it was so much stronger. It was a circle of safety and genuine care. This new community taught me the true meaning of family. Family is not just about blood. It is about who shows up for you. It is about who brings you soup when you are sick, who listens to you cry for the 100th time, who celebrates your victories as if they were their own. My tribe became my safety net. They were the ones I could call in the middle of the night. They were the ones who reminded me of who I was when I forgot. They did not try to fix my pain, but they sat with me in it, and that made all the difference. There is a life waiting for you after the fire. It will not be the life you had planned. It will be something else entirely, something wilder, truer, and more beautiful than you can yet imagine. The end of my marriage felt like the end of my life, but it was not. It was the end of a cage I didn't even know I was in. The cage of expectations, of pleasing others, of shrinking myself to fit into a life that was not truly my own. The betrayal, as brutal as it was the key that unlocked the door. It forced me to walk out of the cage and into the wilderness of my own becoming. Today, my life is not perfect. It is messy and unpredictable and gloriously mine. I still have hard days. I still feel pangs of sadness for the life that was lost. But the sadness no longer owns me. It is just a visitor that comes and goes. My baseline is not grief anymore. It is a quiet, steady peace. A deep, unshakable knowing that I am okay, that I can handle whatever comes my way because I have survived the unimaginable. I have looked into the abyss and found my own light reflected there. I am no longer afraid of the dark. If you are in the rubble right now, if your world has been shattered by a betrayal you did not see coming, please hear me. You are not broken. You are breaking open. This pain is a wholly transformative thing. Do not rush it. Do not numb it. Let it burn away everything that is not essential. Let it carve you into the person you were always meant to become. Underneath all the layers of who you thought you should be is the real you, the untamed you. She is waiting for you to come and find her. Your happiness is not out there in the hands of another person. It is in here. It is in your own brave heart, your own capable hands, your own beautiful, resilient soul. You get to create your own joy. You get to define your own dreams. You get to build a life that feels true and good to you from the ground up. The devastation was not your choice, but the rebuilding, that is all yours. So pick up your tools. Lay the first brick. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your greatest adventure. A beautiful, untamed life is waiting for you.